Hi, Stefan. Thank you for joining us on the Frostcast today. We're very keen to sit down and have a chat with you and discuss lots of different topics and questions that we've got lined up for you. So I'm gonna fire away first, and I think this forms as sort of a foundational question for the audience. Is obviously you've developed the Streets app as part of a project that you've been working on personally. We just wanted to know what is the aim of the Streets app and what problem is it trying to solve?
Okay, so just a bit of back story. So Streets essentially is a mobile application slash platform that connects event curators, event-based vendors, and consumers who who attend those events from curators or products. And essentially, I'm creating a marketplace that one allows users to find, these events, these products when they attended events. So from a manage from a both like experience perspective, everything related to the event can be managed through the app when it comes to communicating with those vendors or event curators, as well as the transactions associated with events, having them all be consolidated in one place versus having to use Eventbrite for tickets to do this, using some other Cash App service or money transfer service to do something else. It really consolidates both the event experience as well as the transactions that occur within them, and then also from the business perspective, when it comes to those event curators and vendors, it allows them to communicate with their potential and current and existing customers before, during, and after the event through certain features that I have built into the app.
I wanted to know, do you think for any business that relies on users such as yours, it's imperative that they have an app? Or do you think you could get away with a website if it's a user-based business?
Yeah, so to answer that question, I've had a lot of people throughout the years, just because prior to going into engineering management, I was a developer for seven years, and I started working on iOS around the time of I want to say like the iPhone 3G. So that was like back in 2012. So I have a plethora, like a long plethora of experience when it comes to like iOS, specifically iOS development, but I've got into mobile. But to answer your question, definitely not. I've Every time someone has asked me, I had this app idea, my first question is, can it be a website or not? And that's mainly because one, apps are very expensive, and they're also more expensive to maintain because you have to deal with, the iOS SDK or the Android SDK constantly updating, languages change and things like that. And then you have to also have people to like maintain those apps, the relationships with the App Store and things like that. And that can become costly versus with the website, the technology, like with web, for the most part, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you have frameworks that make that much easier, but web languages have been pretty constant throughout the years versus languages such as like Android and iOS switching from starting out Java going to Kotlin, and then you have iOS starting out with Objective-C going to Swift, and now Swift UI. So there's the learning curve, and then just to kind of maintain those apps become expensive. The only reason I would tell someone if they need an app is versus a website is if they need some of these APIs or technologies that exist within the mobile phone that they can't necessarily get from a web browser. But at the same time, a lot of these web browsers are becoming very, very smart. For example, like I know location was something that was only available on, the app, on apps and websites. You had to use like IP lookups to kind of, get the location. But now some of these smart browsers allow you to get, locate precise location and things like that. So it really depends. But for the most part, I'd say like maybe 85% of the companies who have apps probably don't need them, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's been also a little bit of a shift. Like a lot of software companies have now kind of tended to swing towards more sort of like cloud-based software. So you've got like obviously Adobe builds all of their softwares out in actual dedicated applications for your computer or for your Mac. But now you've got kind of like opposition like Figma, who completely builds their entire software base out of the browser, which I think brings a lot of versatility to a lot of clientele, because Adobe programs and dedicated programs obviously are more intensive on the machine, whereas if you can sort of condense a program into a browser, it makes it so much more versatile for such a wide range of users suddenly, because not everyone has some super powerful computer or a Mac, which is expensive. So I think, I think for sure, the apps being cloud-based do tend to streamline the offering to consumers. But I think apps are nice because having an actual dedicated piece of software on your phone or your computer, it's just a much more clean-cut and well-rounded kind of experience, I think, for people. But obviously, you talked about, apps being very expensive to develop. So I suppose that kind of like segues into the next question, which is, if I lack development skills or funding, what options exist for me to create an app for my business, if there is any?
Sure. So I think I start from the cheapest to the most expensive. Depending on your tech savviness, and especially at this day and age when it comes to like AI, it may be worthwhile to, if you're very serious about it and you want to save money, I'd say like it may be worthwhile to, pick up a framework and, learn development. If you have a coding background, or at least try to pick it up. And with like Open AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, and all of these things, they're making it a lot easier to get into, to break that barrier into coding and kind of learning it yourself. That's actually that's the cheapest way, in my opinion. The second way is kind of looking for a technical co-founder, finding somebody, depending on your skill set, finding somebody who can, whether or not they want to work for equity or for money or whatnot, but finding somebody who's passionate and equally invested in your idea and kind of get them on to develop the idea or, app that you want. From there, now I'm going into parts I don't recommend. There are websites such as like Zendesk, Fiverr, where you could get people to build apps, but I don't recommend that, especially if it's something complex, because you're essentially, hiring somebody to contract your app to build it. But when code moves from developer to developer, you have somebody who doesn't know that code base, is not familiar, and then that's when they start writing their own code that may be anti-pattern, that may be breaking like the design pattern and stuff like that, and then the code just gets messier and messier. And then also you run the risk, potentially you contracting somebody on Fiverr, and then they are sending it to someone else to do the work. So I definitely don't recommend that if it's something complex. And then I think the last part, which is probably somewhat unrealistic for most like grassroots indie developers, is trying to raise money for seed funding. But I know that's a lot harder when you don't have like a proof of concept MVP.
Yeah, for sure. I actually had another kind of question that actually wasn't part of the original list, but I actually wanted to find out from you. You obviously mentioned AI. I've kind of started integrating AI into my workflow a little bit. Like if I ever need to think of something that I can't just do off the top of my head, I go to AI. In the coding space, in the development space, do you think that AI is going to help, or do you think it's going to hinder the industry? Because obviously AI is it has to be programmed, obviously, at the source to actually generate what it needs to. But do you think it's going to somewhat actually start to take away maybe opportunities from potential developers and stuff like that? Because obviously people can then just go, hey, ChatGPT, code me a website or code me an app. Do you think it's going to help the industry maybe, or do you think it's going to actually make it worse in terms of jobs?
Oh, in terms of job security. So I think, in my opinion, and I'm just going to be blunt, but I think the junior developer job is dead, in my opinion. So I really feel bad for like a lot of the kids studying computer science right now, because from a company's perspective, and I get it, why pay to train somebody to learn something when these AI models are capable of writing code. Like, for example, I think I mentioned to you, Josh, one thing that I was integrating was the ability to add tier tickets. So when one sells out, another comes. So right now in Streets, I have some logic that's a method that said it will get the available tickets. And what it does is it loops through my tickets. It finds the tickets who are still within their sale end and sale start date, and also still have quantity. And I'll kind of read the prompt that I wrote into ChatGPT, and it actually wrote this. It actually updated my code. All right, if you don't mind, I said, I would like to update. Let's see. Here it is. I said, I have a getter to list all the available tickets for an event. It filters out tickets whose sales haven't started or ended, but I don't filter out sold out tickets. This is because I still display them and show them disabled to the user so they're not confused. And then I wrote, I would like to update this logic to include replacing sold out tickets with tiered tickets so that they are successfully linked. In ChatGPT, it worked. Well, I haven't tested it yet, but I looked at the code and I was doing this right before this meeting. It looks pretty good. And I was like, man, I would have been here for probably 30 minutes trying to write this out line by line, but it gave me something to work with. And the cool thing about it is that if it doesn't work, I can literally tell ChatGPT, this doesn't work. This is what it gave me. It'll go back and reanalyze and it'll come with updates.
Yeah, that's why I kind of asked you, because I think from what you're saying really is like from a very junior basic level, that's kind of that opportunity is going to be then taken over by AI. And it's actually essentially going to help the efficiency and workflow of maybe senior developers, and like yourself. So that's very interesting. I've always wanted to know directly from someone who does program coding and development and stuff, because you obviously see a lot of opinions flying around the internet and LinkedIn and all these places of people saying AI is good, AI is bad. But it's interesting to see how it affects different industries in different ways. But I was interested to know, so thank you for that. I don't know if you've got any other points you wanted to add on that as well.
Yeah, from what you mentioned, from like this senior development aspect. So in my full-time job, we started to what's the word I'm looking for? Suggest that certain developers use, Copilot and things like that to boost productivity. And it does work. Like, it helps me when I do my coding for Streets. It does boost productivity. I don't use it for everything. If there's some things like I know, like I'd rather just write out and code and do it myself, I'll save it. But when it comes to complex tasks such as that, or when it comes to, I'd even say like helping me with writing blog posts or cold call emails, I use that because, it's marketing and things in business is my specialty. It's more so development. So I've been leaning into that, more of it from that aspect. But yeah, when it comes to technical, I really feel bad for a lot of these developers who are coming out because I don't think anyone was expecting it. I sure wasn't.
Yeah, it seems like the development curve of AI has just absolutely gone nuts. I mean, I feel like AI wasn't really a thing until recently, to be honest. I mean, you've obviously had Google as kind of like your fallback, I mean, I remember in school, or in business even, like when you want to know something and find out something, it was like Google was your go-to. Now it's kind of like ChatGPT is almost like having a digital assistant, but it feels like it's just kind of like popped out of nowhere. And seeing some of the advancements they've made with the software about, like live translations, for example, live conversation, it's kind of a bit scary in a way, to be honest. But it's very useful from time to time. Like even now, like I wanted to plan a football tournament, and I literally just typed in, if I've got 3 teams and we want to play 5-minute games each over 5 rounds, please make a schedule. And it just goes, and it just creates this whole thing. It would have taken me honestly like half an hour, like you were saying. For some of the other stuff you've been doing, it would have taken me ages to do it, but it just went, whoop, there you go, all in a list, all done, and straightforward. So it is helpful. But yeah, no, thanks for your feedback on that. I was just interested to know from your perspective.
And like you mentioned, where you feel like it came out of nowhere, I really feel like I think prior to AI, like we've been learning, and technology has kind of been like sort of linear, but I really feel like from the AI standpoint, just because these models can teach themselves to an extent, it's really like more like at an exponential rate. So I remember last year, I didn't even know really what ChatGPT was. I didn't use it at all, maybe this time last year. And now I have a ChatGPT subscription.
There you go, you're converted.
Yeah, what I found really also interesting, Stephan, you reading out your prompt to ChatGPT. I think actually that indicates your knowledge in the space. And maybe for someone listening, that sounds like a weird comment to make, but how articulate you were with the prompt, there was a lot of like key words that you used in there that, like, if I was writing that prompt, that you gave me and you the same brief, I wouldn't have written the prompt to that degree of detail because I wouldn't understand development well enough. So I think that's an important point to be making. And there's actually some websites or locations you can find where people will sell prompts. Now, I'm not saying go on and buy them, but I actually think, because originally my thought process would have been, why would I ever pay for a prompt? I can do that on my own. But actually, the nuance of the prompts really dictates how much or the quality result you end up getting. So I think it has a lot of value from that perspective. But that gets me into the next question, which is, we've already been talking about AI, and maybe simply this is the answer. But what are some of the trends you've been seeing in the event space or digital event space that have been coming through?
Yeah, sure. So as mentioned, I launched last month, and I've had like two major events, so paid events so far, which Streets hosted. I'd say like some of the trends of where I think things are going, I feel like COVID definitely changed the world. And we're still recovering from it. But I think one thing that has stuck has been people want to have more of like a contactless and cashless world. So I definitely see the event space being it's more contactless, more cashless, and more the transaction just being less personal. Like, and what I mean by less personal is the transaction happens and not too much friction and things like that. For example, I find when it comes to like, with Streets, with these events, I have online sales and door sales. People, of course, want to get their things right away. They don't really want to interact with somebody to buy something. So they'll be more, inclined to buy things online and get certain things at events versus having to deal with and transact with someone in person is what I'm finding. That's been the major thing. As mentioned, I've only had like 2 events so far. But I am curious to see like where things go. I also will say one thing that I'm also seeing as well is that people want to consolidate like their experiences. Especially like one of the biggest hits that I've been able to kind of pitch to event promoters was the one of the benefits that Streets has versus a lot of these other competitors is that I combine online and in-person payments. So from a consumer data point of view, from a financial just management transactions point of view, I'm finding that these curators want to make as much money as they can by getting as many people to their event, but it's much easier for them if they can consolidate things. For example, like the first event I had during Memorial Weekend, from online sales, things were great, but in person, the promoter was like, "Oh, just pull out Cash App. We're just going to pull out like Cash App, and we're going to just take money from there." Not realizing that, afterwards, they kind of realized, yeah, those in-person transactions, there's no way to kind of reach back out to them because I don't have their information. So I find like them looking to centralize their consumer and financial data and just kind of making everything more centralized is the trend, at least what I've been experiencing with some of these event curators.
Okay. And on the topic of consumers then, how do you think new businesses or apps, I suppose, how do you think they can effectively attract users and also retain them at the same time? I suppose maybe more from a developmental side. I suppose also kind of reaching into your brain with regards to your thought process behind Streets as well, because obviously that's kind of the whole point, right?
Sure. So I think what will attract consumers, to be honest, and we're kind of seeing it now, people like, new and fancy things. They like new technology. So I think for me, one of the things that I have on my backlog once I get through a lot of these, which I call like P1 feature sets, is definitely like AI exploration. I want me just forward thinking. I'm just thinking about like AI and some of the things I want to do. I would like to, for one, from the consumer standpoint, I would love a feature I plan on putting a feature in here where a user can speak to the prompt like, hey, can you tell me what events are going on in my area, and kind of have like that natural language like processing, so it can come up with a list of events and things, well, a list of events curated to like your wants and needs and kind of learning from you. And then also just from like the event curator perspective, I want to put something in where they can say, hey, I'm having this event at so and so and so, can you draft up a event description that's compelling at this time and this, that, and the other, and have it all automated. I really find, and I think that's just human nature, the things that are successful, if you can save people time and money, they'll flock to it.
What's interesting about the Streets app is that there's a B2B component and there's a B2C. So you got obviously the users, which if you get users, then you'll get the events, right? Because then but on the flip side, if you get the events, the event organizer will push the Streets app because they need to sell the tickets. So there's an interesting dynamic there that's kind of unique to Streets, and obviously quite a sort of strength of the app is that you've got a B2B and a B2C opportunity to sell. So if one of those options starts to lack, you can kind of pull on the other comment for a little bit of support for user base, which is really exciting. And then my favorite question, which I ask everyone who comes there, is what does success look like for the Streets app if you had to quantify it?
If I had to quantify it, so I would say success for me, if I had to quantify it, would be somewhere around either 10,000 processing 10,000 orders a month, or actively having about 75 to 80 events. And I say 75 to 80 because I'm under the assumption that each event promoter that I want to go after will have at least maybe 100 to 150 patrons at their event, and maybe 1 to 2 events a month. So that's kind of like my thought process. And to be perfectly honest, success for me, honestly, is if I make enough money to support my lifestyle as my full-time job does, that's great enough for me. And I think at that point, I know like I would quit my job, but I even like in my head, I'm planning on at least preparing to possibly quit even beforehand if I start to see the scale and start to make money. Because the way that I see it is like Streets is, as far as the feature set, it's you do it once, and now I'm more so focused on marketing it to different promoters and stuff like that. So once I feel like I'm the recipe is working. Once I get the recipe down packed, it's going to scale from there. And then once I get to the point where I have much more business than I am able to focus on my full-time job, I'll either then consider getting a co-founder or someone, or like quit my job to pursue a full-time.
I know that you were talking to Josh a little bit before I got into the room about how you've secured, I think, a couple of curators. Is that right? Or you've had a couple of events. I just wanted to know, how did you actually solve the conundrum of, because one relies on the other, right? So it's really hard to get one on board before the other. So I was just actually interested to know how you managed to get one. Did you put the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart, so to speak?
They do depend on each other, but I will say, especially like during the beta testing and figuring out like what from the B2B and like what these consumers really like, I realized they just want their tickets. They don't care how what service they're using. Granted, I think fees, once they see fees, they'll really start to like compare and things like that, but they just kind of want to get their tickets. So to be honest, it was really more so me focusing on getting the event curators on board and convincing them like, hey, you should be on here versus Eventbrite, and their customers just came without issue.
I see. So the customers actually followed the curator. I suppose that makes sense, right? Because I mean, they, as you say, they're going to have their own patrons and their own sort of fans attached to their events. So if you can actually focus on getting as many curators as possible, the users will just follow. Because I mean, if they say, hey, go and sign up on the Streets app, to go and buy your tickets for our event, then then that's it. Then the users come automatically. And I suppose the golden ticket really is to try and get exclusivity with these guys if possible, obviously, because if you can offer them something that's cheaper and more streamlined, then, I mean, there's no reason why they wouldn't be exclusive, right?
Great. And then, I mentioned before you joined, I actually got my first repeat.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
We sold 250 tickets, and they actually called me yesterday and said, hey, we're looking to use the Streets app for our July, I think, 19th party. So it's
Awesome.
fun. Yeah. But as mentioned, because I found that the curators will bring their crowd like right behind them. I've been, even from a feature set perspective, I've been more inclined to get that stuff out the way, just because one, it will allow their people to come back and they're used to it and make it a better experience. But as I'm learning, from working with these curators, it's ultimately setting myself up for when I'm ready to scale and start, cold calling these other curators. I already know, the problems and the points prior. So I try to focus on both, but I am prioritizing at least the event curators, and then I plan on going to like the event-based vendors right afterwards. And then from there, if necessary, then I'll, work on promoting just the general public on getting them in once I have enough curators. But as of right now, it's pretty like exclusive for certain events, for certain curators.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it sounds like you've achieved some success already, even though your success has obviously been outlined before. But yeah, no, well done. Congratulations on that. That's really good.
Honestly, the success for me, even of course, it's quitting my job, but the fact that I built something that's useful and it was able to make money, sitting there, is success in
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. 100%. Very rewarding. Very, very rewarding. It was great to sit down and chat with you and understand obviously more about, the Streets app itself, and obviously get your insights and opinions on lots of other topics as well, related to the industry. So thanks for your time. And that concludes our episode. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. And I hope whoever listens to this, it at least inspires them or gives them some clarity. So thank you.
100%. 100%. Thank you very much.